In this podcast, I wanted to cover how to set up local and world hands. Now, I'm going to do this on the right arm, but at this current point, the control system, the hands actually have local orient controls already set. So my first thing is I want to dominate the hand with my control. So I'm going to grab my driver and then my driven. They both have the same orient, the same position and orient on it. So when I go into parent constraint, I can actually, I don't need to have the offset on or off. It doesn't matter. If I have it off and it moves, then I know I did something wrong. Okay, so this should be working and the hand should be left behind. Good. Okay, now we got to reestablish our connections. Now, typically, in prior examples, I just grabbed right off the hand, right off the arm, and then went right into the system. And why this has breaks when we do this with, if we just use this joint, is this joint does not have the same orientation as our arm or our hand. It's actually not that far from our hand because our hand is straight. It's close to world, but it is not world. It's a little off. Okay, so that being said, we're going to use this local pad as a pretty much a magnet system, a system to give our values from. So I'm going to duplicate this twice, and I'm going to delete the controls underneath it. I don't need those. And I'm going to call one of these right hand one world. Actually, I could just say world like that. And then this guy is going to be my right arm local. Like that. Okay, so both of these have the same orientation in each other. However, the difference here is I'm going to go into my arm. Like that, and I'm going to take the local, the right arm local, and put it right under the waist. And this is what's happening here is now my last system in this arm is now going to have the same orientation as both the world, the local, and the system. So they have a nice like launching point from this. So first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that the hand and the arm are moving together, translating together. So I'm going to grab my driver, which is going to be my right arm local, and my driven, which is going to be my right hand local. Oops, there. And I'm going to go into my constraint, and I'm going to go to point constraint, like this. Okay. So they should be right on top of each other. So maintaining offset turned off should like not do anything. However, now if I grab my arm, there we go. Cool. So it's now moving back and forth. Now I want to set up the orientation because right now it's actually only in world mode. You can see I can do that type of thing. Okay, so now we're going to select our driver. Now our world is going to be our driven. So we got local, world, and then back to our local hand because that's the driven. I go to my constraint and I go into orient. Now these all have the same orients on them. So again, offset turned off. If I see any movement, I did something wrong. Okay, so now this might still do the issue, one of the issues on here. Ah, good, it did it. Okay, see how the hand kind of flipped back like that? That's because the interpreting is getting kind of messed up. And that's actually an easy fix. If I go into the orient constraint, that's the problem is that the interpret type is set to average, and it's getting confused because it's on the negative axis. So if I sent this to shortest, like that, see, it works. Okay, another thing to notice is that it's kind of moving halfway in between. And that's because our orient constraint is both set to local and world. So if I set this to local like that, you'd see it just move around locally. And if I go into and set it to world, it would do that likewise. So I'm going to create an attribute on here, and I'm going to make a SDK switch for this, or set driven key. Add attribute. Okay, and I'm going to say local world. My local is going to be 0, and my world is going to be 10. I hit OK. Good. Now I'm going to do a set driven key. I select an attribute and say set driven key. My driver is this attribute, and it's going to be local world. My driven is going to be my orient constraint. Now this would be the same thing if I wanted to have the hand separate off. I would do the same type of system with the point constraint. I might make another attribute for that. Okay, so I'm going to say this is my driven, I'm going to grab my 2 weights here. Right now I'm in local mode and my attribute is set to 0, which I want to be local. So I say key. Okay, and we can see that the orient now has a keyframe on it. Now I'm going to move it to 10, which will be world mode. And I'll just invert that. I'll go back into my orient and I'll flip local off and world on. And I'll say key. I'll close this down and see, I'm in world mode and I can like move my character's body around. You see it stays behind like that. And then I could switch into local mode so I can do like normal walking, things like that. Like that. Boom. And there's a local world switch.